Tatiana the Tiger, San Francisco. 2007, Carlos Souza Jr. was 17 years old. On Christmas Day 2007, just after closing time at the San Francisco Zoo, he and two brothers, Amrit Paul and Kulbir Dhaliwal, 19 and 23, were near the Lion House Cafe. A Siberian tiger named Tatiana had arrived at the zoo the previous year and had already attacked a keeper in December 2006 during a feeding, leaving the woman with permanent scarring to her arm. That earlier incident had been attributed to keeper error, and the enclosure was not modified afterward. The three young men had reportedly been taunting and throwing objects at animals throughout the day, including at Tatiana's enclosure. At some point that evening, after the zoo had closed to the public, Tatiana scaled the wall of her grotto. The moat surrounding the exhibit measured 12.5 feet, roughly 4 feet below the 16-foot minimum height recommended for big cat enclosures by the American Zoo and Aquarium Association at the time the exhibit was designed. Concrete chips later found embedded in her paws indicated she had clawed and pushed her way up the wall, using the texture of the surface as leverage. Tatiana went directly for the group on the other side. Sousa was her first target. He suffered skull and spinal fractures, a severed jugular vein, and extensive bite and claw wounds across his body. He died at the scene. The Dhaliwal brothers fled toward the cafe, bleeding heavily, and pounded on the locked doors, screaming for help. The employee inside initially believed the screaming man outside was experiencing a mental health crisis rather than reporting an animal attack, and relayed this assessment to the 911 dispatcher. Zoo security, separately, initiated a lockdown procedure intended to prevent the tiger from reaching the zoo's main public areas, a protocol that further delayed the emergency response reaching the brothers. When armed officers finally arrived, Tatiana was standing over one of the brothers. They held fire initially, fearing they would strike him, and worked instead to draw the tiger's attention away. When she turned toward them, they shot her dead with a single round to the head. Both brothers survived with serious injuries to their arms, necks, and heads, requiring extensive hospitalization. In the days that followed, the San Francisco Zoo publicly admitted the moat wall had been constructed below the required safety standard, a deficiency that had existed since the exhibit was built and had gone uncorrected for years. The Xiamen Zoo, Walrus, China, 2016. In May 2016, a tourist visiting a wildlife park in Xiamen, China, climbed over a barrier to take photographs near the walrus enclosure and fell into the pool. The walrus, an animal weighing approximately 1.6 tons, grabbed him almost immediately. Walruses of this size are capable of generating enormous crushing force with their flippers and body weight, far beyond what a human can resist in water. Witnesses initially believed the animal was playing. Walruses are capable of significant gentleness in trained interactions, and the crowd's first reaction was laughter and applause, assuming this was part of a show. But the walrus pulled the man underwater, wrapped its body around him, and would not release its grip, repeatedly dragging him beneath the surface and back up. A zookeeper, the animal's longtime trainer, who had raised it since infancy and had cared for it for more than a decade, and who was considered the person the animal trusted most, jumped into the pool to free him. Rather than releasing the tourist, the walrus pulled the keeper in as well and wrapped itself around both men simultaneously. Despite the keeper's strength as a swimmer and his familiarity with the animal, the combined weight and grip of the walrus kept both men submerged for an extended period. By the time park staff and bystanders understood that what they were watching was not a performance, both men had drowned in the enclosure. Maqsood Khan and Vijay, New Delhi, 2014. Maqsood Khan was 20 years old. In September 2014, he climbed over the protective railing at the white tiger enclosure at New Delhi Zoo and dropped down into the moat surrounding the exhibit. He was reported to have a history of mental health difficulties. For several minutes, the tiger, a white tiger named VJ, did not approach him. Footage taken by visitors shows Khan crouched at the bottom of the enclosure, at points appearing to gesture toward the animal. Above him, a crowd had gathered, shouting and filming. Some accounts say visitors had been throwing objects and shouting at the tiger throughout the day, agitating it. Eventually, VJ approached, seized Khan by the neck, and dragged him across the enclosure floor. The zoo had no tranquilizer equipment on hand and no emergency protocol for an intrusion into the enclosure. The single guard stationed at the exhibit stated afterward that his assigned responsibility was crowd control, not enclosure security. Khan died from his injuries before staff could intervene. The footage of his final minutes, including moments where he appears to plead toward the tiger, circulated globally. Sarah Maclay and Padang, United Kingdom. 2013, Sarah Maclay was 24 years old. She worked as a keeper at South Lakes Safari Zoo in Cumbria, England. On May 24, 2013, a Sumatran tiger named Padang passed through a sequence of internal doors that were designed to separate animals from staff at all times. The doors relied on bolts to remain secured. An investigation following Maclay's death found that the bolts on the door to the tiger's den did not seat correctly in its frame. It would bounce off rather than lock, leaving a gap of approximately 0.78 inches. That gap was sufficient for the door to be pushed open from the other side. The fault had reportedly existed for some time prior to the attack and had not been identified during routine checks. Padang reached the corridor where Maclay was working. The attack caused catastrophic injuries to her head and neck. Colleagues who responded described her injuries as unsurvivable. She was airlifted to hospital and died later that day. The 2014 inquest could not determine precisely how Maclay came to be in the same space as the tiger, but found that the defective bolt was a central factor in the incident. The zoo's license was suspended following the investigation. The Salzburg Rhino, Austria, 2023. On the morning of September 12, 2023, a 33-year-old zookeeper at Hellbrunn Zoo in Salzburg, Austria, was carrying out a routine task, applying insect repellent to the skin of a white rhinoceros named Jetty, a procedure performed regularly because rhinos have thick but sensitive skin and are highly vulnerable to insect bites during warmer months. The procedure was normally carried out in what zoo staff described as a protected area of the enclosure. For reasons that have never been determined, Jetty attacked her. The animal weighed approximately 1.8 tons and was 30 years old, having lived at the zoo since 2009 with no prior history of aggression towards staff. She sustained severe chest trauma and was found to have succumbed to her injuries at the scene. Resuscitation was attempted by responding paramedics and failed. Her husband, also a trained and experienced keeper at the same zoo, was working nearby feeding other animals and heard the attack begin. He ran to intervene, attempting to draw the rhino's attention away from his wife and chase the animal back. Jetty turned on him as well, fracturing his leg before he managed to get clear. He was taken to Salzburg University Hospital, where he underwent emergency surgery and survived. The zoo's director told reporters the couple were both highly experienced. The husband had worked at the zoo since 2008, and his wife, previously employed at a zoo in Munich since 2014. The zoo closed for the remainder of the day, and Austrian privacy law prevented the release of either keeper's name to the press. The Badaling Safari tiger attack. China, 2016 Bottling Wildlife World, outside Beijing, is a drive-through safari park where visitors remain inside their vehicles while animals roam freely around them. In July 2016, a woman named Zhao Qing got out of her car in the middle of the Siberian tiger enclosure after an argument with her husband, intending to move to the driver's seat. A tiger reached the car within seconds and dragged her away from the vehicle by force. Her mother, Liu Huanru, 57, got out of the car to try to save her daughter. A second tiger attacked Liu and killed her. Zhao survived the attack with severe injuries. The entire sequence was captured on the park's surveillance cameras and broadcast nationally, reigniting debate in China over safety enforcement at drive-through wildlife parks, where signage warning visitors not to exit their vehicles is standard but rarely enforced.